Welcome, welcome to the Wellther series. This is number 2 of 3 with Daniel Aaron. And if you want to go back to the first one, you'll get an introduction to who Daniel is. But I'll let you know he's a great guy. Awesome, extraordinary. Let's go over there. And what we're going to do is share a little bit more of this unfolding story or re-story that we were talking about in the first video. And I'm just wondering, Daniel, to be able to start this one off today, is there a place that you would like to start, a word or a phrase that'll just get us going today?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thanks for, getting to have more fun conversation. And one of the last things we were talking about in our previous episode was uh, the RE words and remember. And one of the things that was coming to me then was, related to what we were talking about previously and as a segue into now, remember in some ways is connected to every spiritual tradition, in that every spiritual tradition really in some way, in different words, is about coming to unity. And unity is the opposite of disparate. And remember, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was shortly after the kind of awakening experience I described earlier, the next step was for me was, wow, how do I live in the world? Like, I've seen this potential, and yet, my experience and my past and everything, there's healing to be done. And so one of the early technologies or methodologies that I got into was shamanism. And I worked with a shamanic counselor, and then I started practicing shamanic therapy for, as an easy way of saying it, myself. And one of the things that happened for me in that process, I had no idea. It just happened spontaneously. And then later on, I talked to my teacher, and she said, "Oh, well, that's this." And I said, "Oh, cool. I didn't know that's, there's a thing. That's what it was." And it was that I had this experience, call it a vision or an alternate reality sort of experience where, and actually it's funny because this was almost 30 years ago and it happened, and I've barely been in this physical place since then though, and it happened just a few miles from here. And what it was is in the vision, my physical body walked into a body of water, a pond. And, it was just this, it was like a dream. Like, I was kind of watching it happen. And so my body goes in, and not only goes into the water, like goes in and, you walk into the water and then like goes underwater. And of course, like in a dream, that was normal and that was okay. And so my physical body goes in and submerges, and, somehow I'm okay and still breathing or get oxygen. And then what happened was, different animals, especially crabs, came and cut my body up into all these different parts. And it was both incredibly scary. There was a part of me that, it was like, if my body was here and my soul was out on a journey here, my body was like freaking out from this, like, heart pounding, like, whoa, what's going on? They're cutting me apart. And it was like they cut my body into all these different pieces, and then they floated out to different parts of this body of water. And, once I got over the fact that that was happening, there was a part of me that said, oh, it's okay, actually. In fact, there was some peace that came from that. It was like, in every spiritual tradition too, or most of them anyway, there is what's called the dark night of the soul. And, that's like overcoming death on some level, where part of us on the personality ego level says, no, I can't do it. It's too much. I'm going to die. And then we overcome that. Then there's like a new life, a new birth. Equally true in businesses and every aspect of life. There's that possibility. So then what happened, this is the the bringing this back together, this story with the question you asked, is what happened then is all these different parts of my body came back together, and they reunited. They came back into basically the same form it had been before. And then I walked back out of the water again in the vision sort of dream experience. And so I was just the same. It was the same body, and yet I was totally transformed. And so when I told my teacher about that, later, I was saying like, oh, there's a really weird thing happened and I can't believe it. And, she's like, oh yeah, well, that's called a dismemberment journey.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a thing called that's a thing. And then she explained it to me, in terms of what it means from the shamanic tradition. And, I think that's part of, for me, the richness of the word remember is pulling these different parts of ourself and in the bigger picture, whether it's our business or our family or on a global level, bringing these different parts of ourself back together to remember that there is unity, that's our true state.
And that's a great story, because it picks up on the other video, number one, where you talked about vision, right? And this remembering coming together. And I remember Edward de Bono, who came up with lateral thinking, was one of his main pieces. And he talked about rock logic and water logic. And I'm going here is because you spoke about water. So let me share with you, okay? One rock plus one rock equals two rocks. But one water plus one water equals one water. This remembering, reigniting, coming back together. There's a really neat story there that helps us from the dream world into our physical world. You've shared a neat connection here, a neat connection. And I think one of the other words I'd like to pick up with you today is this word resilience, right? Because there must be a tie between resilience and remember. I'm sure we'll find a water flow that brings those together. Any thoughts right now?
Yeah, well, and I love what you shared about rock logic and water logic, and part of what I get from that is, for us as a culture and within the culture of our organizations, even to create harmony or unity, to align ourselves toward a common goal, part of what we need is that water logic that is a connection from the heart, that's a coming together in terms of a shared humanity, I suppose.
Yes.
And go ahead.
No, I agree that there's bringing it together. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember years ago when in the business I was running, which was really over my head at the time. I didn't have any formal business training, and and suddenly this organization I had started just because I wanted to create a workshop or training to help people, then kind of grew out of control in a sense. And that wasn't out of control, but it grew bigger than I had intended it. And at a certain point I said, well, I don't have any formal business training or anything. And I stumbled upon this book called The Advantage: How Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business. And, I think it's a great book. And whether anybody reads it or not, the title alone is really suggestive. Organizational health, more important than anything else in business. And when I stumbled on it, at first it was hard for me to swallow that. And then as I dove into it, something in me said, yeah, there's something I need to learn here. And it's not just about me getting things done. It's how do we get there? And as I learned more about it, it changed the quality of the organization in a really beautiful way. Now,
would that touch then on the sense of resilience as well? We were sort of following that thought line.
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna come back to that. I suppose that was a lateral thinking. Yes. Um, well,
Edward de Bono would be proud of you.
exactly, exactly. Um, well, what was occurring to me in terms of resilience, what's still occurring to me is that dark night of the soul is, I think, something that happens for all of us in business and life, certainly in terms of spirituality. And what accompanies it, what's part of it, is there has to be a fear that I won't be able to handle it. I won't be able to do it. Or in the business sense, I've got this vision and this is what I want to create. And if it's a worthy vision, if it's a worthy goal, then there's got to be struggles along the way. We got to come to points where part of us, like, in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, where we say, like, you know what, I can't do it. It's not going to work. It's impossible. The odds are against me. I can't make payroll, or, the opponent's too great, or whatever it is. And to come up to those places in ourself and then stay, right, and just stay there in the alchemy of that situation, that's resilience. And every time we come up against that edge, it creates in us a stronger inner power, more of a faith in some way that, yeah, you know what, no matter what the odds, I'm gonna bring it through. There is a way. If you know if this is worthy, if this is in divine alignment, if this is really serving the world, whatever my goal is, and my personal philosophy is, if we don't have that feeling about our life or about our business, well, then we're off track. If it's really worthy like that, it takes overcoming struggle, challenge, fear, and that builds resilience. And I think in some ways, I'm on a bit of a rant. I think in some ways that's what our customers, our employees, our friends all respond to, is that we've developed some certainty in the face of opposition or that fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And if I was to add uh, another dimension to this notion of resilience, it's about knowing you're going into something that's a bit of a crisis, and you're going, oh, I'm going in. But coming out the other side, you're sort of better off than when you went in. All right. But the key aspect, I think, of resilience is to be aware that while you're in, is don't go into dysfunction. There's learning to be done. Yes, I get that. But don't go into the sense of dysfunction so that it destroys you and you stay in that sort of loop down, right? Resilience gives you that how to get out of that a lot quicker without going into the dysfunction, but in a place that's better than when you went in. And I think it links back to the importance of the re-story, right? The story that you share, and then the re-story of what that is to be able to get you out of that. Any thoughts on that part?
Yeah, and I love that you keep coming back to re-story, that we get to remember that we're creating a different story. We have that possibility. And I think especially true on a cultural global level right now, and certainly, you know, touching back to something I said yesterday about me as a US citizen who lived most of my adult life outside of the US, being back here in the US right now. It's so easy for those of us with a different vision for the world, say, than a lot of the struggle or the division that seems to be promulgated these days. It seems to be really advancing, right? On a certain level, it would be easy for those of us who have more humanistic or Unitarian view of our world and what we want to create to lose heart in the midst of what's happening now. And so for us to have faith that there is another story unfolding, that really in some way what we're at right now is one of those culminating scary points that require resilience, in the story, where the hero, and the hero in this case being us as a culture, as a world, all creatures, at that heroic journey, saying, oh, our enemy is great right now. How are we going to overcome this? We're required to have resilience and faith and vision to believe that this story is going to have an ending that we like.
So if I was to extend that story a little bit more, the notion of effort, energy, vitality, I believe that when I play out what's happening in the world today, there's a lot of people who are in organizations and in their life who there's like a diminishing vitality. And that influences, right, the remembering, the restoring, the determination to get into their vision, to actually pay attention to resilience when they're in a place of crisis, this perspective. So what would be the story that we could unpack around vitality? Because I share that because I have to go back into the 1980s, early 90s, okay? And I was working on workplace wellness 1.0, right? And I did workshops on things like patience. And another one I did was on vitality. And here we are, like we're talking 30, 20 years later, and vitality is popping out, I think, into our consciousness again about how to be able to deal with these things that are unfolding. Any thoughts around vitality you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Vitality is an interesting one. I'll respond to that in again, a little bit of a story, in a sense that, the early part of my own sort of life and career, from this awakening to possibilities to realizing, like, whoa, I got a lot to work to figure out how this being human thing works. That launched me into like a quest that could be called healing, or, figuring out how this human mind body thing works. And I got really quite obsessive about it, personal and spiritual development, and how to evolve, and, from diet perspective to physical movement to, meditation practices, all of these kind of practices. And I went along with that for quite a while, and developed a lot of, I don't know, power is maybe not the right word, but ability or resilience, energy, vitality. And then at a certain point, I got the message that, okay, now it's time to devote myself more to, not even myself, to be devoted to being in service, right? So what's all this development about? It's to serve others. So that launched into this whole thing that I referred to earlier in terms of organization and business and trainings. And as I went into it, the further and further I got into it, the more it seemed to me in some way that I was sacrificing all of my disciplines and practices, and I got so busy and lost in the demands of the business and the organization, and taking care of customers and employees, and little by little, like, taking care of myself flew away. And I thought at the time that, this was noble and it's what I needed to do. And of course, the obvious conclusion is my own being went, slowly went downhill until I became less and less effective in what I was offering to others. And even my diet and my physical practices and all of that kind of went by the wayside. And at the time I thought, oh, I don't need it anymore. And I'm doing this. And then I came to a crisis point. And you mentioned the word crisis earlier. One of my favorite little linguistic switches around crisis. I don't even know if this is true, but I heard that in in an Asian language, I don't know which one, if anybody knows, tell me, I'd like to know, that the character for crisis is broken into two components, and one is danger and one is opportunity, right? And that's, I think, says a lot about what a crisis is. Yeah, there's a danger. And, when my own crisis kind of happened there, what I realized is, well, if I really value this vision, if I really want to be of service, then this organism here needs vitality, right? Needs to have energy. If I'm going to accomplish anything, if I'm going to, stick it out when the going gets tough, I need energy to do that. And that was so powerful for me, because it just brought me back to so much that I had learned about energy and vitality, and I associated to it in a way that I'd forgotten, right? It had slipped into, oh yeah, that would be good to do, and I should do that, and I would feel better if I did that, to a knowing inside myself that this is essential. If I really truly care about what I say I care about, I have to have the energy and vitality for it.
Yeah, I think the character, if I remember correctly, I think it's Chinese. It's a Chinese character, and I like that notion of, like, you can't pick up one end of a stick without picking up the other end. You can't pick up one side of a coin without picking up the other side of the coin. So in a sense, you can't pick up some danger without some opportunity, and some opportunity without danger. It's what I call helping and hindering and helping. And you unfold that. And I do a lot of that kind of work in organizations and with individuals as well. So this vitality aspect, I agree with where you're going, because it's the vitality of being able to deal with the danger and the opportunity, right? To be able to deal with the hinders and helps. So another word that pops out that I'm going to weave into this right now is the sense of courage. Because resilience, the courage to be in that resilience so as not to go into dysfunction, I think there's courage in dealing with the crisis so you don't fall behind. There's the courage of remembering, the courage of restoring. So I want to offer up the word courage, and we've talked a little bit about this, danced around it, but we haven't really had a chance to dive into it. So can we unpack courage? Have you got something you'd share with us around courage?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful word and so powerful, right? And just simple start from French origins. It says it's from the heart, cour, right? And so courage is, it's a willingness to feel and to derive our energy and our vision from feeling. And I think if we're looking at this re-story idea, some would say right now we are learning to tell her story rather than a distorted history, right? Where history is from the patriarchal perspective, and we're perhaps coming into more of a her story that's feminine right now. And so that our existence on the physical plane is informed by the feminine, informed by feeling, informed by values, rather than just what we're trying to get, what we're trying to take, right? And certainly the masculine patriarchal one's perspective is conquer, take, right? And there's value in that, of course, too, and that's part of our achievement. And I think what we're invited into right now is a perspective on, well, what are we creating right now? What's the world that we want to live in? And it takes a lot of courage in the sense of, not to be fearless. And this is a little pet peeve of mine, this idea of fearlessness that is talked about these days, in that we're not meant to be fearless. We're human organisms. There's always going to be some fear. If we want to create what we want, what we need though is a really healthy relationship with fear, right? It's so that, and what courage really is fear being there and still staying with what we want, having the resilience to follow the vision and stick with it in the difficult times. So, and maybe the last thing I'll say on that note right now is I really want to sort of tip my hat to I'm so lucky to have worked with a lot of students and clients and who have had the courage to feel into what is scary or what we might, part of us doesn't want to feel. It's easy to swallow what we've been sold. It's easy to just keep going with something because it's what I've always known, but to instead say, wait a minute, what's real here? What do I want? Where is this going? And feel sometimes what might be scary or uncomfortable to say, well, no, I need to do a pivot. I need to change. I need to say what's uncomfortable or to step up and say, wait a minute, yeah, this isn't right, y'all. There's another way of looking at this. That's I think the most important courage is to be able to feel ourselves. We often think of courage as, being this great strength and the warrior, and there's obviously something beautiful and powerful about that. And what's really important and really valuable, and I think a deeper courage, is to to look at what is it that divides us, and what are the projections or the discomfort, and how do we work with each other in order to take away those divisions and come back to who we really are, that oneness.
And you used an important word in there. It's a word that I'll latch onto, the word pivot. And to be able to make that pivot, because a pivot is different than, well, I've got to do an adjustment. No, I got to do some course correction here. Pivot, whoa, hang on a minute, right? The intensity, and to be able to work with that, I think is very much about courageous commitment to make that pivot. And that courage aspect that you very eloquently shared with us around, the heart aspect, the heartfeltness, but with the awareness. And I think we used the word discernment in the video number 1, and to be able to weave this together, right? But if we're picking up both ends of the stick and we're talking about courage, and it all sounds really great, you spoke to me the other day about the rebel. And we didn't get a chance to really get that out on the table, because I would look at my own life and I go, okay, I've had lots of courageous commitment. I've had machine guns stuck up my nose. I have them touch the tip of my nose. I've seen death and dying in war zones. I've seen lots of these kind of things, but I didn't go so far as to go like completely into a rebel. So I may be taking this concept of rebel to another level, and you might have something else, but I just think it's time to have weave in the rebel story here. I have a sense of that, so I'm gonna put it out there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great. And I'm assuming that the folks that are with us today are or in the replay in some way are interested in creating something that's different from what's been, different from perhaps the mainstream, that there is a focus on business and achievement, and with values that are congruent with a greater sense, a care for each other and a care for the world. And we just need to be honest about the fact that that's rebellious. That's, going against the mainstream. So it takes courage. There's resilience involved in that. It takes telling a different story. And, one of the perspectives that I bring into life and my work, and I utilize for myself and with clients and students, is through the lens of astrology. And in astrological terms, it's the planet Uranus, right? And related to the energy of Aquarius. And everybody knows the song, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius," right? And on many levels, we have the information that, hey, the world is at a crisis right now, right? There's no doubt about the danger that's here, and there's opportunity here for sure. And what's interesting to me about the rebel archetype, which is well embodied by Aquarius and Uranus, is it comes in some way from this altruistic perspective of, hey, wait a minute, there's another way of being in the world. There's a higher order. There's a way that we can break out of the old routines and ruts that we've been in, to create something that serves us all better, that has a greater sense of equality. And to do that, we have to, on the one hand, look at the world from this other perspective and say, wait a minute, we got off track, or we just got stuck, or it's time for a change. But at the same time, we're not going to be able to affect positive change in that system if we are too detached from it. So, we have to be able to enter the system while retaining our sort of rebellious approach, yet with a sense of understanding and acceptance to it. Like, we can't change anything if we are simultaneously judging it, right? So we have to somehow connect to it and be part of it, even while at the same time saying, well, we can do better, y'all. We can do better in the world now.
So in a sense, an entrepreneur has to have a little bit of rebel blood.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship is rebellious to start. On some way, we as entrepreneurs are saying, I can do it better. I'm going to do it my way, right? I'm not going to just follow the path or the well-worn road and work for somebody else. Those of us that have an entrepreneurial spirit are in some way saying, hey, I'm going to break free from that old paradigm. I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah, thank you, Frank Sinatra, right? And that brings out, the vitality to be that rebel, the courage to be that rebel, right? The discernment to be that rebel, right? These are all aspects of what it means to do that, right? And this notion of being on the journey, right? That rebel journey. Is the rebel journey the same as a hero journey? I don't know. What would you say?
I think so. Yeah. I think, at least if not the same, there's certainly a lot of overlap. The hero's journey is in some ways, whether reluctant as the hero or called as the hero, whatever gets us there, it's saying like, I'm going to, I'm going to create something different. I'm going to create transformation. And, if we go to literature or films, part of why we love heroes and heroic journeys and stories, and why stories are so connected to this heroic journey, is because it brings some transformation, some evolution to that character. And then we as the viewer or the reader, we get into the trance of being in the story, have the transformative experience ourselves. And ultimately, I would say that that's what we're here for on the planet, to be in the world, not of it. We're here to be on the earth, to transform, to evolve, to let go of the old and embrace something new, to create something new. And again, to do that, it's rebellious. It's saying, hey, the old isn't good enough anymore. There's got to be something new.
And I think there's a language that goes with that, there might be a language of servant leadership, but maybe it's service leadership. There's a language there of being in the world, but being for the world. There's language shifts that some of us have to be a little bit rebellious around, because I know when I go to play with words, people, you get that little tilt of the head or that laughter or that direct eye contact. What are you talking about kind of idea? But you got to, as an entrepreneur, you got to sit in some of that rebellious sort of a approach to it to bring all of this to bear. So knowing we're getting kind of close to closing off this segment, what would be, and if you were to take about a minute, 2 minutes here, what would be one or two actions that would weave together words like remember, resilience, vitality, rebel, courage? Anything that you'd like to share right now that someone could go into action around?
Yeah, beautiful. I love that question. I think one of the potential values for our, viewers, listeners, our friends here who are tuning in is to, float along with the fun of looking at different connections and words and telling a different story, and the riffs that we're having with this, and then to sit with that in some way. Like, I would encourage someone, if they've found it interesting or useful in some way, to then just stop and reflect and actually write. Writing, I think, is one of the most
Yeah.
important, powerful things we can do. To right after this, just as soon as you can, just pause and write and say, what am I seeing for myself, right? Because whatever I say or what you say is great, but what does it mean to you, the listener? What does it mean for you in your life? What can you take from it that you can then apply in your life and your business that will change things? And it's great that you come to a suggestion or call to action, because as fun is as it is to get insights and make connections and play with ideas, I love that. That's also completely impotent unless we apply it in the world, right? And again, going back to my heritage as a spiritual teacher, so to speak, is it's like all of the spiritual understanding or all of our practices, none of that means anything unless we can apply it here and now in our lives, until we apply it in our relationships with each other, in our business. And I think that's one of the great things about business is it's a really powerful spiritual path. It's like, you're not just going to sit in a cave and meditate. It's like, well, you know what? I need to face up to customers and employees and, deadlines, and really apply what I think I know. And that's the ultimate measure of, do I really know it, is, does it work?
Yes. Well, that's why you'll see my head pop down every once in a while. I'm jotting notes down around what you're sharing, because I'll go into my reflective journal tomorrow, right, to remember, to restory some aspects of this so that I can weave that together into where I'm going. So I agree with you. Writing and finding ways in which to integrate these ideas is so important. And with that, I'm just going to share is that it's danielaaron.com is your website to jump in to look at more of what Daniel is doing, and danielaaron, AARON.com. And with that, Daniel, I'm going to just say thanks again for today. And when we get together for the next one, we'll certainly unpack some other ideas for people. So you get the last 3 words. What's 3 words you want to share with us, and we'll close it off.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, there you go. So everyone, enjoy the journey, and we'll see you on the next Wellther episode with Daniel Aaron, and that will be 3 of 3. So take care, and thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.